It's 7:10. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Lexikopoleio, your international bookstore in Athens. So also welcome to the 112th place you shouldn't miss in Athens. This is an inside joke, but now you know it. It's not a joke. Welcome. We are so delighted to be the first that present 111 places in Athens that you shouldn't miss, part of the series by emons. I would like to thank, of course, Alexia Amvrazi, Diane Farr and Diane Shugart, the authors of the book, who are here with us. And of course, Mr. Nikos Vatopoulos, prominent journalist and a real connoisseur of the city of Athens. Also, a special thanks from all of us, from the Lexikopoleio team, to our friend Isabella Curtis, who enlightened us on this special publication. And without her, this event could not have taken place, and we wouldn't have the books also. So let's proceed, and let's give a big applause to the people here who will give us a glimpse of an Athens that even us Athenians don't really know. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all. Thank you very much for having the privilege to open this discussion. I'm supposed to deliver some introductory notes, but I think it's a great chance to share with you some thoughts on Athens. It's a great book, this new edition on Athens, and I was really surprised that there were so many things I did not know, so it's a great motivation to get out and explore more of the city. Is Athens a beautiful city? That's a question that was very persistent in my mind ever since I was a child. And I remember I was quite embarrassed when I had visitors to the city and I had to tour them around and guide them as a connoisseur, as a child or adolescent that was growing up in this ever-changing city. But growing up, I realized that the right question would be, is Athens an interesting city? And I think this is a much more crucial and interesting question as well. So I broadened up my perception of the city, and growing up, I understood that Athens has a unique place in the history of cities, first of all. And if we leave apart the ancient heritage, it's a wonderfully complex and interesting modern city. When I talk to friends that have never been to Greece, and they ask me to describe my daily life in Athens, or how Greece is, or why Athens is so different from other European capitals. I had come up with an answer that says that Athens is a brand new city compared to Rome or Paris or Vienna. And it's really surprising to realize that, since we have the landmark of the Acropolis and the rest of the archaeological sites in the city. I loved what the author said, that they had in mind the first-time visitors to Athens, first of all. And I always think of them when I meet them in the streets. And now that we have so many tourists in the city, I always think what they think about this city, especially when I see them in streets like, let's say, Piraeus Street or Lyosian Street, or in places that are not really exciting, but could be exciting. And I asked myself, if I was a non-Greek traveler, would I have a desire to be in Athens as a visitor? I think that's a very good question for every city, of course. And I would say yes. Yes, I would be very interested in exploring this ancient modern metropolis of the Eastern Mediterranean, on the verge of Western Europe and Near East, a very old-fashioned term, but still prevalent, I think. Yes, But the most important for me, coming to Athens for the first time, is to understand its adventure. And it will be interesting to have a visitor have a look at old photos of the 19th century, let's say, taken from the Likabetos or the Acropolis, and see the small city in a rather treeless landscape, and realize that the creation of modern Athens was an idea of the European Romanticism, let's say. And this is, on its own, it's a very exciting idea. But the birth of modern Athens is a part of European idea about the birth of nations, about the geopolitical games in the Eastern Mediterranean, and, of course, the idea to create a modern city. And modernity in the 19th century, at least in the 1830s, was linked to neoclassicism. So this is a very, very, let's say, enriched version, enriched translation of the term neoclassicism. It was a very modern idea. And if we think of the old architecture of Athens during the Ottoman times, and you think the first neoclassical houses in the 1830s, you realize the big line that was drawn between the past and the new era of Athens. So that was, let's say, an introduction to how one could perceive the modern city of Athens. Nowadays, I stroll around all the Athenian areas, and I still discover aspects of the city that really surprise me, although I've been born and raised in this city. Athens is huge, of course. The historic center is small, but the neighborhoods are countless. And the circles of life in Athens have been amazing if we think of the history of this city. And if we stick to the 20th and 21st century only, we can see 4 big circles of migrations and population flows into the city. Let's remember the 1922-23 population exchange with Turkey and the influx of refugees from Asia Minor in the 20s. So that was the big leap, let's say, of Athens into the area of the big metropolis of the Mediterranean. And then if we think of the 50s and 60s, with the influx of people coming from the Greek countryside into the capital. And then if we think of the early 90s, having all the people from the Balkans and the ex-Soviet republics into Athens, and from Poland as well at that time. And then we think of the recent years with all this migration from Asia and Africa. So we have 3 big circles of population flows into the capital that have played a major roles in how we perceive daily life in this city. I think this is very, very crucial to understand and to explain all these countless apartment blocks that really, I think that are a bit of a shock for a first-time visitor if one goes to the Likabetos, let's say, and looks at the Acropolis amidst a vast sea of apartment blocks of the 50s and 60s. But for us Athenians, of course, it's part of our very normal perception of our surroundings. And I'm pleased to realize that as I grow older, I feel quite tenderly towards these apartment blocks that have been really terrifying when I was really, really young and immature in translating all this urban civilization of Athens, the urban culture of Athens. I think that there's a wonderful, let's say, mid-century style in Athens that has to be explored in the years to come. I think the younger generations will appreciate this heritage that we leave to them, this 1950s and 60s style that is really unique to the Mediterranean and to this side of Athens. But on the whole, of course, Athens is very difficult to grasp and understand its layers and all these mystic, I think, pathways. And I love the description of the authors They say that they came by different paths to Athens, which I think very interesting. They have this ceaseless pleasure of discovering new places, as we all have. And I loved the description of the city as passionately lively, which it is. Darkly disturbing, that's my favorite, darkly disturbing. Well, yes it is, and always intriguing, yes, but darkly disturbing, yes. That's a very, very unique description of Athens, and when I go around, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Acharnon Street or Patission Street and places that are quite far from the center. The old neighborhoods of Botanikos, Kolonos. I love these old neighborhoods of Athens with small houses from the early 20th centuries and apartment blocks from the 60s that look so old now because they are not kept in a proper way. But yes, I found there that it's a darkly disturbing city there, but always exciting. So that's my perception a little bit about this city that I love. I really love Athens. I think it's unique. And Athens helped me broaden up my perception on beauty. Because we have to be more, you know, free and more open to perceptions of beauty. Yes, we're not in the 19th century, but we have to invent new ideas to enjoy life and enjoy this city. And this book helped us a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Wow, yeah. I will stand up. Thank you, Nico. And I am so delighted to meet you finally because I read your column every Sunday. And reading that column gave me actually one of my places because you wrote about Odos Tournikioti at the bottom, in the depths of CD, which is a tiny little street, might even be the shortest street in Athens, and it's brightly colored. It's not gray. It has none of those 50s apartment blocks, and it is, each facade has a different bright color, blue, green, red, and I wanted to find out why because of Nico. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, although she said not to say anything, to dear Isabella, without whom this book never would have taken place and we wouldn't be here tonight, because not only did she tell To Lexikopoleio about it, she also told me. And she said, there is this series of wonderful books about cities in Europe and cities around the world, but Athens isn't in it yet. This is your next job, your next project, Diana. So I said, right. But when she showed me the list, and I saw all these names, Munich and Florence and Rome and Berlin and Istanbul, forgive me for saying that word, but that's the title of the book, I was surprised that Athens wasn't in it. And Liverpool was. Athens comes after Liverpool? Well, anyway, the good news is that we got to write the book. And I know, the minute Isabella told me about it, I knew who I was going to get to help. Alexia and Diane, who are my dear colleagues from various enterprises, Athens News and Odyssey, and even the Greek News, we go way, way back. We do. So not only are they wonderful writers, but they have a different perspective. We come from different paths to this wonderful city that we all love. And they are also quite a bit younger than me. And this was necessary, that we try to fit in as many different age groups as possible, because Athens is a very old city, but it's also a very new and modern city, and that's where Alexia comes in, because she has a very different point of view of. And when we actually sat down and compared our different lists, the proposals that we wanted to make to the publisher, we found that we all had many places that the other two didn't know about. This was extraordinary to me. And and we didn't overlap, hardly overlapped, maybe 2 or 3 places. It was amazing. And I still haven't been to all of their places, so I have a lot to look forward to. When we got in touch with the publisher and they accepted us and they looked at our list again and again and again, they said, we have one thing that we don't want you to write about, and that is bookstores, because if you write about one bookstore, then all the others will be jealous. But if we could have written about a bookstore, we know which one it would have been, right? The 112th place. They also said, make your places as varied as possible. And we're not interested in beauty. We are interested in stories. We want the stories behind each place. And so that was, of course, as Nico said, Athens is beautiful, but not in a conventional way. So we had a lot of stories to tell, and they were not hard to find at all. When I started thinking about what I wanted to put in, of course, as a food writer, I wanted to put in some of my favorite food places, like the tiny little spice boutique on Evripidou and Athinas, which is no bigger than a cupboard. It's the smallest shop, must be the smallest shop in Athens. And then there's the olive store that sells nothing but olives, the Tistaikis Loukoumades place that sells tiny loukoumades this big, and nothing has made nothing else and sold nothing else for the last 100 years. And there's no syrup. You just bite into it and you don't know how the syrup got there, and that's their secret. Then there were the ancient sites that I wanted to talk about, like the Roman Agora, not because of the Tower of the Winds, but because of the loos. Did you know that this is the first place that they instituted a fee for spending a penny? That's where the saying comes from. The Emperor Vespasian had to impose taxes, like our present government will put taxes on anything. So they put taxes on pee. But when his son said, "Oh, Daddy, how could you do that? It's so disgusting to tax excrement," he said, he waved a coin in front of his son's nose and he said, "Does it smell?" And he said, "No." He said, "Pecunia non olet," money does not smell. So that could be the motto for this day and age as well. I also like to talk about the Ottoman Gate just across the street, which to me has a fascinating story because it started as inside was a theological school, a medresa, but as the tensions built up towards Greeks aching for independence, the Ottomans, Turks, started using it as a prison. Unfortunately, after Greece won its independence, the Greeks continued using it as a prison, so it became known as the Greek Bastille. And in that courtyard was a huge plane tree from which they used to hang people. It was known as the hanging tree. Can you imagine shopping in the Agora across the street and having these bodies wave back and forth? Anyway, that plane tree was hit by lightning in 1919, and the only trace of it is the taverna around the corner that's called the Platanos. There's so many other places that I wanted to talk about, and others that I stumbled upon by accident, like Sophia's Peloponnesus' wonderful place, which she tends with love and care, which is the Katakousinos apartment on Vasilis Amelias, opposite the National Gardens and the Vouli. It's a cameo salon apartment that was owned by a French-educated psychiatrist and his writer wife, Lito and Angelos Katekousinos, who knew everyone there was to know. And if you go in there, you will see a door painted by Gikas, paintings by Tsaroukis, books by Seferis, all given to them. But you will also see paintings by Picasso, books by Camus, and William Faulkner, and to my great surprise, Herbert Humphrey. But they have concerts and lectures and plays, and it's something really worth knowing. There are many, many, many things that one could say about Greece, about Athens, the Big Olive, and it has so much in it. And I know that some of the people here like to look at TV and say, oh, but we can't go to Exarchia. We can't go there. It's horrible. It's dangerous. It's dirty. You're going to be mugged. But I discovered writing this book that such was not the case. There's lots of places that maybe have a dark side. And in fact, our publishers wanted us to explore the dark side. They were more interested in dark stories than they were in what we like to call quirky, funky stories. So we emphasize the quirky and the funky, but there is plenty of dark. And I have to say, because there are German publishers, we did throw in a few gratuitous, perhaps, stories about the Gestapo. Is Yannis Varouhakis here? Our photographer is missing. That's a great pity, because the book wouldn't be, it would just be words. We only had to go to 37 places each, but Yanni went to all 111, and he did a fantastic job of taking photos. Just to finish, the book is called 111 Places because, according to our publishers who are based in Cologne, 111 is their lucky number. 11 is their lucky number because they have a carnival that starts every year on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This also happens to be Armistice Day, but undoubtedly Carnival predated that. So they had to, 11 places wasn't enough, so they had to add 100 to it. But we, or maybe, will go on to do another 222 places. Anyway, I hope you will enjoy the book as much as we enjoyed writing it. I intend, as I said, to go around and look at Alexia and Diane's places and discover what a really magical city this is. There is so much in it, gardens and monuments. And if you read it from cover to cover, as I had to do to proofread, it really encompasses the whole history of the city, from the very beginning to the very end. We have virtual reality in there, so it's even beyond the end. Enjoy it.
Hello from me as well, Alexia Amvrazi. I'd rather sit down, but I'll just stand up for a second and I'm sitting down again, so you've all seen me now. First of all, I want to start by thanking all of you for being here tonight. Honestly, it's so warm and cozy in here and so heartening to have you all here. And of course, to thank To Lexikopoleio for hosting us and to Mr. Vatopoulos for his wonderful introduction. And truly, it's an honor to have you here to introduce our book, because you really are a connoisseur about Athens in an exceptional way. And of course, also I want to thank my co-authors, with whom we worked both in the sense of as a team, but also with our publishers in Germany in a seamlessly, effortlessly, miraculously easy way. I mean, really, I've worked on an article and it's been hell, and this was a whole book, and it was just, there was this incredible connection between us, and as Diana said, we each had very different perspectives, but we were all very open and flexible, both to accepting each other's perspectives and to being honest, when we didn't like something that the other proposed, or we just thought it was a bit, rubbish, we were laughing about how it came that we ended up doing sort of different areas of the book. So Diana focused more, as she said, on the more historical, cultural aspects, the gardens, the architecture. Diane went into sort of the darker part of Athens, historical as well, but the edgier and more disturbing historical part of Athens. And I ended up going into sort of the more slightly metaphysical and fun and quirky side. Now, when I woke up this morning, I thought I don't want to make a speech because speeches are so boring, and not that the ones before me were boring, they were wonderful, but I know if I made a speech it would be boring, and so at least I thought I'll have fun by writing a poem instead. So bear with me while I share my feeling about this book as a co-author via a poem rather than a little speech. Athens, there are countless ways to encounter you and to try to better understand the paradoxical and shape-shifting nature of your identity, your purpose, people, land. But we have chosen to start with 111 ways to inspire through a triple-digit number 1,000 perspectives for the observant gaze. Athens, the ancient revered capital, constantly being discovered anew. Democratically, enticingly, and with zest, you keep us guessing what is false and what is true. Have you never ceased? No, you have never ceased to flagrantly live, experiment, celebrate, despite undergoing so much dramatic change, such a palimpsest of history. And with ancient treasures lying buried under the layers of cement where we walk your streets in the now, you never leave us without a sense of mystery. Anarchist dogs graffitied on walls, barbershops inspired by Egypt generations ago, radical fashion and cinemas lit by the stars, churches steeped in the tearful prayers of souls living loss and wars, blank-eyed statues with soulful stories to tell, shops that for generations have tradition to sell, and then innovation, new vision, youthful spirits looking far ahead without forgetting to incite the living and to honor the dead. The dead. Thank you. Athens, you constantly reward us with your mythologically idyllic beauty and chaotic faultiness at once, and have impassioning secrets to reveal if only we stop and watch you dance. And as much as you keep changing, your soul will always remain the same. And even on days when we walk asleep in our hypnotized routine, you nudge us and invite us to rejoin you in your light-filled games. How do I love the Athens? Well, let me count the ways. After listing 111 reasons, I'll just have entered through the gate of your city's maze. Thank you.
Okay. Well, for an introvert like me, writing the book was fun. Having to talk about it, not so much, but I want to thank you for being here and for making this so much easier. It's nice to see many familiar faces. In some cases, familiar voices or familiar names, because I see here people who I finally meet after many years of collaborating via email and other ways. So for that, I'm grateful. Writing the book was a lot of fun, mostly because of my two colleagues here. We came to it, yes, through different paths. We have different relationships with the city. But I think what made the book work and what made us work so well together is that the thing we do share is how much we love it. We're all here by choice. And sometimes I get a little angry when I hear people on the buses or on the streets talking about how they dislike Athens or would want to be somewhere else. And I think one of the most common questions I'm always asked is, why are you here when you could be somewhere else? I don't want to be somewhere else. I want to be here, with all its beauty, all its warts. And I've lived in enough other cities in the world, cities that people admire, to know that they also have warts, but they don't have what Athens has. And it is that vibrancy. It can be a very difficult city, but it's also a very human city. And I think its difficulties are reflect rather the fact that it is human. And I'll wrap this up so we can take some pictures, because I know Nikos Vatopoulos has to go. He very kindly came here before going to open a show he has curated, so he really should be there. I think writing the book, I did learn something new about Athens, and for me, it's what it is, the essence of Athens, is that it is change. It's a city, I think we look at it as something permanent because of the antiquities, because of the Acropolis, because of the history. But I think what characterizes the city more than anything else is the fact that it changes. It changes daily. It changes while you're looking at it. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes it so wonderful, because you live in Athens. I don't think you may swear from time to time, you may wonder from time to time, but you will never, ever be bored. So I hope some of that comes across in the book. I thank you again all for being here. Thank Lexikopoleio and Odile somewhere. I was hoping, it's a shame Yannis Varouhakis is not here. It's even better that Yannis Varoufakis is not here. So, you know, that could cut both ways. It would certainly make for an interesting discussion. No, I actually quite like him. But anyway, thank you all. And if anyone has any questions, I think we should... how do you want to do this, Diamandis?
Here's another microphone. It's on. So, anyone with a burning question about Athens or a remark? Here, Spiros.
Hello, I welcome you too from Lexikopoleio's part. Just a little remark. I really liked your book because I have the impression that when you're an Athenian and you live here, you don't have, as Nikos have mentioned it, you don't have a picture of your city. The gaze you bring on a city when you come from outside is totally different than the one we have on the city. So I think it's not only a book for people who are not from here, but even for Athenians.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. The lady back here.
Yes, I've been. Is it on? Yes, yes. I've been living in Athens since 1971. Yes, I'm usually told by my family to speak, not so loud. One of our great delights since retiring is being tourists in our own city, and every so often we say, today we're going to go and explore. We've been helped by your book, I'm pleased to say. My daughter gave us as a Christmas present shortly after we retired, and it's been our companion. But we also go to, again, some of the darker places, and we also try and go to some of the green places. And there are plenty of green places in Athens, and I'm glad to see, just glancing through the book, that some of them have been included. And we now will have a whole lot of other places to go and explore when we are tourists in our own city. Thank you very much to the three of you and to the photographer.
Anyone else? All right. We can use this one if you want to respond.
Congratulations to the three authors on what appears to be a wonderful book, and I really look forward to reading it. But one obvious question is, how did you boil down the places to 111? Was there a master list? Were there what sites did not make the book, and how did you do that?
I'll start with my problems and how I approached it, and then Alexia and Diana can also answer. Going back to this idea of change, one of the problems I had in pinpointing places is that I needed to make sure of their longevity. Quite often you'll see a place, a wonderful place, and think of a landmark like Zonars, which I know has reopened, but it's very, very different to what it was. There are fewer and fewer places like that in Athens because of this vortex of change. And there were some places that we consider, at least I considered, but I very surreptitiously checked with owners to see how long their lease would last and things like that, because I didn't want to, and we started writing this book a year ago, and I didn't want when it came out for people to go and then find that the place wasn't there or was something different. The other difficulty was interest. What would interest people? In Pankrati, for example, there's a plaque on one of the apartment buildings on Spirou Markouri where the poet Kostas Varnalis lived, which is a very important landmark for someone who knows who Varnalis is. But not everyone, sadly, is as well versed and as familiar with Greek literature as Greeks, and even many Greeks sort of just have a vague idea of who he is. So it would have been a great place to put in, but there was nothing architecturally to recommend it. So you would have that as an incentive. So that was like an example of a place that you couldn't put in.
Tough question from a tough editor there. No, I agree with, well, for me it was very much the same case for all of us, I think, in the sense that we are in a time of crisis and change, and you never know what's going to be there in a few years, even next year sometimes. So that can be a bit of a challenge. But for me, in terms of what I was looking for, I'm quite people-centric. I was looking for places that represented more than just the aesthetic appeal of what you would see there, but the story behind them, like we all did, to represent what Greek people are like, what Greek society, what Athenian society specifically is all about, and what the psyche of Athens is. And sometimes there's this incredible contrast where you're presenting an old building, which has its own story, but the way it's being treated today shows a completely different story. So for me, it was very much about narrowing it down from that perspective.
I don't have very much to add to that, except that the very first place I wrote about as a sample of my writing was the Greek Gastronomy Museum, which sadly had to close. And we did exclude a few other places because they were bloody minded. And they didn't seem to understand what the book was about, and we decided, okay, you don't want us, we don't want you. But mostly it's what Diane and Alexia said.
I confess I don't have a question. I just want to thank you so much because I've been living here for 16 years. And as anyone who lives in Athens knows, when you live here, you have visitors. And I've just dreamed of having a book to have on my counter in my house or to send them ahead of time. And so I just really want to thank you. It's gorgeous, the photos, and just the way you've designed the book, that it's not huge, it's not tiny, it's just the right size, and the way you thumb through it, and it's alphabetical, and you've got the text on the left and the photo on the right. I just want to congratulate everyone involved in the project.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Katakousinos House Museum, I just want to say a really big thank you that you write also for our small house museum in Athens. Now it's the 10th year that we are alive, and I promise to all of you that I'll do my best that when you decide to visit us, we are going to be open. And many thanks for all of you.
Anyone else? We're getting warm, you know. I think you're warmer now, yes?
Thank you. I haven't had the opportunity to read your book yet, but I have a question about the choice of places you had. I mean, you talk about places in Athens. Athens is huge. It's a big place and it's a small place. So where are the limits? How did you choose the places to include or not within some limits, I guess?
I think one criteria was easy access, that and where the access isn't easy, that the place would be worth the time and the effort to get there. Because, okay, we all live here and we have the time to explore the city, but another important part of the readers are not, they're visitors. So it needs to be something that's accessible, I think.
Yes, definitely easy access for both for locals and for visitors. This has to be noted as well. I mean, because this book is aimed at locals as well, who are discovering their city from a new perspective.
However, I did go out of my way to put things in that are a little bit further afield, like the Diomedes Botanical Garden, which nobody knows about, even though it's one of the biggest in the Eastern Mediterranean, and to the Greeley's Water Lily Nursery, which it happens to be situated right near the Marathon Museum. So why be boring and tell people to go to the Marathon Museum, which you want them to do? But tell them to go to the Water Lily Nursery first, which is, again, a wonderful botanical garden, or the Verres Museum, which is outstanding in Paeania. We tried not to have too many places out of town, but definitely the ones that are in there are totally worthwhile. You always have to make a choice, but flip a coin or something, but...
Anyone else? Anyone upstairs? we can pass it by, you know. No. I think there. Well, maybe there are some burning questions that they need to be made, you know, up close. So I would recommend that we give a big applause to Nikos Varouhakis. I said it correctly, right? Yannis Varouhakis. Okay. I tried to not make the mistake with the surname. So, Yannis Varouhakis. Okay. And we should mingle, yeah? We would, you know, fold all the chairs, and maybe there are some questions that need to be made, you know, up close. Also, I would, we have, you know, some copies left of the book. Where if someone needs, you know, our dearest authors to sign the books, we can take some pre-orders, if you like, you know, some names, and we would gladly do that. So, a big applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you from all of us.